Before I married Bruno, his mother, Donna Nady, adored me. She used to call me my daughter-in-love and tell everyone how I brought light into Bruno's life. At family dinners, she would hold my hand and say, "He's never been this happy. I prayed for a woman like you." When we got engaged, she cried like it was the happiest day of her life. She hugged me tightly, kissed my forehead, and told me she was finally gaining a daughter. But something in her eyes that day didn't feel right. I ignored it. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't joy I saw in her tears. It was fear. Fear of losing him. The first few weeks of marriage were blissful. Bruno and I moved into our apartment. We decorated together, cooked at night, laughed like kids in love. But right after the wedding, something in Donna Nady shifted. Suddenly, the warm invitations turned cold. She still came to visit, but now with comments, not kindness. "These curtains make the room feel heavy, don't you think? You're not using canned food, are you? Bruno has a sensitive stomach. Still no baby? That's strange. You've been married for 6 months." At first, I brushed it off. "It's normal," I told myself. "Mothers-in-law take time. It's probably nothing." But then came the first real slap, not with her hand, but with her words. At a lunch with my family, out of nowhere, she smiled and said, "Marrying into our family is easy. Staying married? That's another story." Everyone laughed nervously. I smiled with a knot in my throat. "Bruno?" He chuckled, thought it was just a joke. But deep inside, I knew. That wasn't a joke. That was a warning. She had started a quiet war, and I was the only one who knew we were fighting. She would speak in ways no one else noticed. She knew exactly how to twist her tone, her words, her timing. She would say something cruel and then immediately follow it with kindness, confusing everyone around her. Like, "You look tired, dear. Are you sleeping well?" He used to laugh more before the wedding, didn't he? Don't take it the wrong way, but Bruno lost a little sparkle lately. She made it sound like concern, but her real message was always the same. "You're not enough. You're ruining my son." And the worst part? No one believed me. Not Bruno, not my family, not even my closest friends. Because she wasn't screaming at me. She wasn't calling me names. She wasn't throwing things. She was too clever for that. She just made me look weak, paranoid, emotional. And when I finally tried to talk to Bruno about it, he just said, "Babe, my mom's just being my mom. You're overthinking." I wasn't overthinking. I was being erased, slowly, methodically, by a woman who smiled in public and struck in private. And the more I tried to defend myself, the more I looked guilty. Guilty of not being good enough for the family. Guilty of being dramatic. Guilty of seeing the truth. Because the truth was, after I married her son, I stopped being her darling and started being her competition. They say a mother's love is unconditional. But what if that love is actually obsession dressed in concern? That's what I started to ask myself after months of silent attacks, passive comments, and moments that made me feel like I was slowly losing my mind, while everyone else praised her for being such a caring mother-in-law. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She didn't need to. Her love, or the illusion of it, was her weapon, and I was the target. She'd show up at our apartment unannounced, always with some homemade meal for Bruno, as if I didn't know how to cook. When I said I would have appreciated a heads up, she tilted her head and replied, "I don't need an invitation to visit my son. This is still his home." Still his home. I had worked hard to turn our apartment into a cozy space, our space. But to her, it was just a temporary extension of her territory. She left little marks everywhere, changed the way the towels were folded, rearranged spices in the cabinet, replaced the soap in the bathroom with the kind Bruno grew up using. At first, I laughed it off, but it wasn't funny. It was a message. I was here before you. I know him better. This will always be mine. Bruno didn't see it. To him, it was cute. That's just Mom. She's traditional. No, she wasn't traditional. She was territorial. And when I started to pull away from her, even just a little, she turned the tables. She began playing the victim, telling family members I was too private, too cold, not affectionate. At a family barbecue, she pulled one of his aunts aside and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "She never hugs me anymore. I guess once the ring's on the finger, we stop pretending." Everyone looked at me like I had just slapped her. And Bruno? He looked disappointed, like maybe, just maybe, she was right about me. I wanted to scream, to beg him to see what she was doing. But how do you explain psychological warfare to someone who still sees their mother as a saint? It all came to a head one night when Bruno came home quiet. Too quiet. I asked him what was wrong. He looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Mom said you told her not to come over anymore. Is that true?" It was. I had asked, politely, respectfully, for us to have some space as a couple, some boundaries. But of course, she didn't tell him that. She told him I kicked her out, said I disrespected her presence, claimed I wanted to erase her from his life. I told him the truth, that I only asked for balance, for time alone with him. And do you know what he said? "She's just hurt. She's never had boundaries before. Maybe try to be more patient with her." Patient. That word broke me. Because I had been patient. I had been quiet. I had been kind. But patience becomes silence. And silence becomes permission. And permission becomes surrender. And I realized she wasn't going to stop. Not until I was gone, or broken beyond repair. If she couldn't destroy me in front of Bruno, she'd destroy me around him. That became clear when family events, birthdays, dinners, holidays, turned from gatherings of love into arenas of quiet judgment. I'd walk into a room and feel eyes lingering a second too long. Smiles didn't reach their eyes. Conversations stopped when I got close. People used to hug me. Now they nodded politely. I wasn't paranoid. I was being isolated by someone who knew exactly how to do it. She didn't attack me with words. She used suggestion. To Bruno's aunt, "I don't want to say anything, but she's so closed off, right? Almost like she thinks she's better than us." To his cousin, "I heard she doesn't like family around. Poor Bruno, must be tough for him." To the neighbor, "Yes, they're married, but sometimes I wonder if she even likes him." Every conversation she had became another thread in the web she was spinning around me. One night, I overheard Bruno on the phone with his best friend. I wasn't eavesdropping. The bedroom door was open, and his voice was low but clear. He said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in the middle. Mom says one thing, she says another. I don't even know who to believe anymore." I froze. I knew then that I was losing. Not because I was guilty, but because she had made the people around me question my character. It got worse. Bruno's aunt called him late one evening. I only heard one side of the conversation, but it ended with him saying, "Thanks for telling me." I didn't know she said that. I asked him what it was about. He looked at me and said, "Did you really tell Aunt Lucia that I don't help around the house? That you do everything and I just sit around?" I was stunned. I never said that. I never even hinted it. "No," I said. "That's not true." But the damage had been done. A seed of doubt had been planted. And once it's in the soil, even if you rip it out, something ugly always lingers. She even started messaging my own family, telling my mother that I seemed distant, that maybe I was overwhelmed, that Bruno was worried about me. My own mother began asking if everything was okay. I was being painted as unstable, untrustworthy, weak, and that's when I realized this wasn't about her not liking me. It wasn't even about me not being good enough. This was about control. She couldn't control who her son married, but she could control how people saw me. And if she could isolate me, turn me into the outsider, the misunderstood one, then one day, when I broke down, she could say, "See, I warned you." And they would believe her, because she'd been setting up the story all along. I was losing my identity, not just in the marriage, but in every room she walked into before me. And Bruno? He still loved me. But love doesn't always protect you from influence. Sometimes it makes you more vulnerable to it. And I was watching the man I loved become more loyal to a lie than to the truth we once shared. There's always one day you never forget. The day the mask falls. The day the monster stops hiding behind polite smiles and passive words. For me, it was a Sunday. Bruno and I had agreed to have lunch at his mother's house, something we had been doing less and less thanks to the tension. But he insisted this one would be different. "She wants to talk, clear the air," he said. I didn't believe it, but I was tired of being the one who always said no, so I agreed. When we arrived, the table was already set, food warm, the smell of roast chicken filled the house, and she greeted us as if nothing had ever happened. "Look who's here, my prince and his queen." She hugged me. Her smile was sharp as glass. We sat, ate, talked about meaningless things. It felt too easy, too rehearsed. Then, as she was pouring juice, she said, "Bruno, you remember how you used to love that girl from the building? What was her name? Camilla? So kind, so affectionate." I froze. Bruno stiffened. He looked at her like she had just slapped him. "Mom, what are you doing?" She smiled and shrugged. "Nothing. Just reminiscing." "Don't get so serious." I knew then this wasn't about nostalgia. It was about comparison, about humiliation. And she wasn't done. While clearing the table, she accidentally dropped her phone. When I picked it up to hand it back, the screen was lit. A group chat. The preview message said, "She's finally here. Let's see how long she lasts this time." I paused. My stomach turned. I wasn't supposed to see that. I locked the phone and gave it back. She took it from my hand without making eye contact. I wanted to leave, but Bruno insisted we stay for dessert. We sat back down. She brought the plates, and then she said, in the most casual voice, "You know, Bruno, I had a dream last night. I dreamed that she left you, just disappeared, and you came back to live with me. You were smiling again." I couldn't breathe. She was saying it in front of me, to my face. And Bruno? He sat there, silent, like a boy trapped between two mothers, one from the past and one he married. I stood up. "That's enough," I said. Her smile vanished. "Excuse me? You don't have to pretend anymore. I know what you're doing. I've known for months. But this is the day it ends." She stood too. Now she looked different, cold, sharp. "I protected him long before you came, and I'll still be here when you're gone." Bruno tried to speak. I turned to him. "You wanted the truth? Here it is. She doesn't hate me. She fears losing control, and you're letting her decide the story of our marriage." The silence after that was long. We left, without dessert, without hugs. In the car, he said nothing, and I realized something else. She hadn't just tried to break me that day. She had tried to expose me, to him, to herself, to whoever she had messaged. She wanted me to snap, to scream, to lose control, so she could play the victim, so she could say, "See? I told you. She's not right for you." But I didn't give her that. I didn't break, because monsters want you to become one too. That's how they win, and I was not going to let her take that from me. The silence after that Sunday lunch was deafening. Bruno didn't speak to his mother for a few days, but he also didn't speak much to me. He seemed confused, disoriented, torn between two worlds, one he had always known and one he had promised to build with me. But there's something you need to understand about emotional manipulation. Even when the abuser is gone, the effects linger, like smoke after a fire, like a whisper that echoes long after the room is empty. That week, I found myself staring out the window a lot, not thinking, just drifting. My chest felt heavy, not just from sadness, but from something worse, resignation. I had fought, I had stayed, I had explained, forgiven, begged, and defended myself more times than I could count. But I was exhausted, and I realized that love isn't meant to be proven every single day just to survive. Love is something you build together, not something you defend alone. So I packed a suitcase. Not all my things, just the essentials. I didn't want to make a scene. I left a note, a short one. It said, "This is not a goodbye, this is a pause. If you want a life with me, it has to be our life, not hers, not in her shadow. I'm not asking you to stop loving your mother. I'm asking you to start choosing your wife." And I left. I went to my sister's apartment. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me and made tea. I cried that night, not from regret, but from release. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched, judged, manipulated, or silenced. I felt like me again. Bruno didn't call on the first day, or the second. On the third day, he texted, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond right away, not because I was punishing him, but because I was afraid of what he would say. On the fourth day, he showed up at my sister's building. He looked tired, worn, A man who had finally looked in the mirror and seen someone he didn't like. We talked in the car. He didn't beg. He didn't argue. He just said, I didn't realize how much of what I thought was mine was actually hers. My opinions, my reactions, even my doubts. He confessed things. That she had messaged him late at night saying I was trying to turn him against her. That she hinted I was planning to leave him anyway. That she said, if you lose her, you'll find someone better. If you lose me, you'll lose part of yourself. He said he believed her, not because he truly doubted me, but because it was easier than confronting the truth. His mother had made herself his emotional compass, and without her, he didn't know which way was up. He cried. So did I. Then he asked the question I had waited months to hear. Will you come home? Not to the house we had, to the one we'll build now, without her inside it. I looked at him, and I said, only if it comes with walls she can't climb. He nodded, and for the first time, I believed him, not because he said the right thing, but because he finally understood the cost of silence and the power of choice. We didn't tell her I had come back home, not at first. Bruno and I needed time, real time, uninterrupted, away from her eyes, her texts, her drama. The air in our apartment felt lighter without her looming presence. We cleaned, we rearranged furniture, we talked about everything she had done and said, and everything we had allowed. It was the first time in our marriage that we were alone together, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and it felt like breathing after being held underwater. But of course, peace doesn't last long when someone's built their identity on control. The day she found out I had returned was a Wednesday. She called. Bruno didn't answer. She called again, and again, until finally he picked up and said, I'm busy, Mom. There was silence on the line. Then her voice, soft, wounded, rehearsed. I just wanted to know, did she come back? He didn't lie. Yes, she did. Another pause. Then came the bitterness, hidden behind concern. So, you've forgiven her for turning you against me? That one sentence said it all. In her mind, I was still the villain, still the outsider, still the one who stole her son. Bruno surprised me with his response. No one turned me against anyone. I opened my eyes. I made a choice. And that was the moment she realized, truly realized, she had lost. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg her to understand. He didn't try to fix her feelings. He just stood his ground. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't accuse. Instead, she hung up. And that silence said more than words ever could. That week, we didn't hear from her. No calls, no texts. But we did hear from other people. One of Bruno's aunts messaged him saying, your mother says you've abandoned her, that your wife is putting ideas in your head. Another cousin called me manipulative online. I didn't respond. Neither did Bruno. Because now we both understood. We weren't fighting just one woman. We were fighting her version of reality and everyone she dragged into it. But something else happened that week. One evening we were watching TV when there was a knock on the door. Bruno answered it. It was his sister. She came in, looked at me and said, I just want to say, I believe you now. I always suspected, but I didn't want to be the one to say it. She did the same thing with my ex, with Dad. It's always someone else's fault when she feels ignored. I broke down crying. Not because I needed her approval, but because for the first time, someone else said it out loud. You're not crazy. You're not the villain. She is not what she pretends to be. We weren't alone anymore. That night, Bruno said something I'll never forget. She raised me to believe love is loyalty without limits, but love without truth is just fear in disguise. And that's exactly what she had fed him all his life. She didn't love him the way a mother should. She owned him. And when she couldn't own him anymore, she tried to destroy whoever stood in the way. But now, her power was gone. Her stories were unraveling, and her grip had finally loosened. Because Bruno had chosen me, but more importantly, he had chosen himself. I knew she wouldn't give up easily. A woman like Donna Nede, who spent her whole life controlling the people around her through guilt, image, and carefully crafted stories, doesn't accept defeat with grace. She accepts it with a strategy. It happened 2 weeks after Bruno stood up to her. We had just begun to feel safe in our space again. We were laughing more, cooking together, going for walks, even planning a short weekend trip, just the two of us. No interruptions, no shadows. And then she called. Not to apologize, not to reflect. She called crying. "Bruno." I went to the doctor. "There's something wrong. I need you to come with me. Please, son." He froze. I could see the storm building behind his eyes. Love, fear, duty, and history all pulling at him at once. He looked at me and whispered, "What if it's real?" I nodded. "Then you go. But you go with eyes open." So he went. I waited, anxious. 3 hours passed. When he came back, he looked exhausted and furious. He dropped his keys and said, "She lied." I blinked. "What?" She made it sound like it was something serious, but it was just a routine checkup. She didn't even have results yet. She just wanted to get me there, alone. He told me what happened. She cried the whole way to the clinic, kept his hand in hers, talked about how she had raised him alone, about how much she sacrificed, how no woman will ever love you the way I do. When he didn't respond the way she wanted, she switched tactics. "She'll leave you, Bruno. One day, when she gets tired of you, you'll come back here with your heart in pieces, and I'll still be the only one who stays." He told me he didn't say much in the moment. He just listened. But when they got home, he turned to her and said, "I'm not your little boy anymore. You need to stop. This ends now." And her face changed. He said it was like watching a mirror crack. Not in anger, in shock. Because for the first time, he didn't defend her, didn't comfort her, didn't let her guilt him back into submission. She said nothing, just walked into her bedroom and closed the door. He left the house and never looked back. But even then, she didn't stop. The next day, she posted a photo of them from his childhood. The caption read, "When love was real, when he still knew who loved him for who he was." People commented with heart emojis, with sending prayers, with mothers never stop loving. She was playing the long game, not just to manipulate him privately, but to paint herself publicly as the abandoned, heartbroken mother. And I realized she didn't care about her son's happiness. She only cared about owning the narrative. If she couldn't have his love, she'd have his reputation. If she couldn't be inside our home, she'd plant herself in everyone else's mind as the good one. But what she didn't count on was that we no longer cared. Bruno didn't reply. He didn't delete her post. He didn't try to defend himself or me. He simply said, "Let her say what she wants. I know the truth now, and I choose peace over performance." That was the moment I knew he was truly free, not just from her house, but from her grip. It didn't happen in a dramatic confrontation. There was no screaming match, no broken plates, no threats. Just a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind she used to ruin, when I decided I wasn't afraid of her anymore. She had texted Bruno again. Something vague, something guilt-laced. "I guess I'll die without my son by my side, but I'm glad she's happy." That used to work. That used to send Bruno into spirals of doubt and guilt. But this time, he read it, sighed, and put the phone down without responding. I looked at him and said, "I think I need to talk to her. One last time." He nodded. "Do you want me to come?" I shook my head. "No. She made me feel small for too long. I need to face her as a woman, not as your wife, not as your extension, as me." So I went. When she opened the door, her expression didn't change. She looked tired, but not surprised. As if she had been waiting for this, maybe even planning how to twist it into a scene where she'd come out as the wounded mother. But I didn't come to fight. I came to speak. She invited me in. I declined. I stayed standing. And then I said, "You hurt me." Over and over again. "You made me question my worth. You manipulated your son, turned people against me, and made our marriage a battlefield. And for a long time, I let it happen. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd learn to love me. Or at least respect me." She didn't say a word, so I continued. "But now I see it clearly. This was never about me. It was about you, and the control you were losing. And I'm here to tell you, it's over." Her mouth tightened. Her eyes flickered. I saw the mask start to crack again. "Bruno is not your possession. He's not your emotional support animal. He's a man, a husband, and I'm not going anywhere." Still, she said nothing. So I finished. "You can play the victim all you want. Online, in family chats, at church. But the truth? You lost not because I took him from you, but because you never let him be his own man. And the difference between us? I love him enough to let him be free. You never did. I turned to leave. She finally spoke. You think you've won? I stopped. Then I looked at her and said, there was never a competition. But if there was, you lost the moment you made him choose. And I walked away. Not because I hated her, but because I had finally reclaimed myself. That night, I told Bruno everything. He didn't speak, just held me, tighter than ever before. We didn't celebrate. We didn't post victory photos. We just sat on the couch, side by side, in a quiet home full of peace, the very thing she had tried to steal from us since day one. We knew she'd still talk, still play the role, but we no longer lived in her story. We had written our own. If you've ever been silenced, erased, or manipulated by someone who hides their cruelty behind kindness, this story is for you. You're not crazy, you're not weak, and you're not alone. Tell me, have you ever lived something like this? Was there someone in your life who wore a mask while breaking you behind closed doors? I'm here to listen. Tell your story. Let's speak the truth together.